Hera reached out slowly. Her hand moved toward the knife. Tay did not pull away. He understood. She touched the emblem gently, her fingers tracing the hand holding the flame. Tears ran down her face. 400,000 Zellions alive today because humans came, she said. Because they did not ask what we could pay. Did not ask what they would gain. They just came. She stepped back, wiping her eyes. The crowd remained quiet, respectful. The story had affected them all in different ways. Some looked thoughtful. Others looked uncomfortable. Everyone looked at Tay differently now. This human with his simple knife carried stories that changed how they saw his entire species. The cargo bay doors opened again. This time, someone important entered. Station Commander Vral. He was Thelonian, a silicon-based species that lived for thousands of years. Vral had commanded Epsilon 7 for over 4 centuries. He was ancient, wise. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed countless wars and peace treaties. His crystalline body clicked softly as he moved. Multiple sensory organs extended from his core, scanning the room. The crowd parted for him automatically. When Vral wanted to speak, everyone listened. He approached Tay directly. "Captain, I have heard interesting reports. They say you are teaching history lessons in your cargo bay?" "Just answering questions, Commander," Tay said calmly. Vral's sensory organs focused on the knife. His kind could see wavelengths of light that most species could not. He could probably see details on the blade that others missed. He studied it for a long moment. "That emblem at the base," Vral said, pointing with a crystalline appendage. "It is very old. Worn smooth with age and handling." "What is it?" Tay looked at the emblem Vral indicated. It was at the very bottom of the blade, near the handle. The symbol was barely visible. Time and countless hands had nearly erased it. But the shape was still there. A circle split by a line, simple, ancient. "That is the oldest emblem," Tay said. "Every human military blade carries this mark. Has carried it for over 200 years. What does it represent?" Vral asked. Tay was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, heavier, like the words themselves had weight. "It represents the First War." "First?" Kiva asked. "Before space travel?" "Before meeting other species," Tay confirmed. "Before knowing we were not alone in the universe. Before any of these other stories happened. This emblem comes from when humanity nearly destroyed itself." The crowd shifted nervously. Every species had violent history. Wars were common in early civilization. But something about Tay's tone suggested this was different. "Worse. Tell us," Vral commanded. It was not a request. Tay took a breath. 500 years ago, humans had nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons. We had the technology to end all life on our homeworld. And we almost did? War between nations? Renth asked. War between ideologies. Between fears. Between misunderstandings that grew into hatred. Tay's fingers traced the worn emblem. It lasted 30 years. Most of the planet became uninhabitable. Billions died. Cities turned to ash. Entire continents poisoned. The atmosphere itself became toxic in places. Vess made a sound of distress. Your own homeworld. You destroyed your own home. Nearly, Tay agreed. By the end, there were maybe 1 billion humans left. Scattered, desperate, still fighting. Still hating each other? We were going to finish the job. Kill every last human. Make our species extinct. What stopped you? Vral asked. His tone suggested he already knew the answer would be important. People like General G and Ambassador Nari, leaders who were tired of death, who saw their children starving and their world dying and decided enough was enough. Tay's voice was steady but sad. They met in the ruins of a destroyed city. No weapons. No guards. Just 2 humans who wanted their species to survive. They made peace, Kiva said. They made a choice. Tay corrected. Peace took decades. But they started it. They convinced others, slowly, carefully, they rebuilt. Not just cities and farms. They rebuilt what it meant to be human. Tay held up the knife so everyone could see the worn emblem clearly. When humanity finally unified and began exploring space, our military leaders created a tradition. Every soldier would carry a blade, not because blades are effective weapons. We have better tools for killing, but because a blade requires you to be close, to see your enemy's face, to remember they are alive. And this emblem? Vral prompted. This emblem reminds us what we are capable of, Tay said. It represents our darkest moment, the time we almost killed ourselves. Every soldier who carries this mark knows the truth. Humans are dangerous. Humans can be monsters. We have the capacity for terrible violence. The crowd was completely silent now. This was not a story of heroism, not bravery or sacrifice. This was humanity admitting their sins, carving their shame into their weapons. You carry your guilt, Vral observed. We carry our responsibility, Tay said firmly. Every species in this galaxy has weapons that could destroy worlds. Energy weapons, biological weapons, planetary bombardment. Everyone has the power to commit genocide. He looked around at the gathered aliens, at their different faces and forms, at the dozens of species represented in this crowd. But only humans engrave reminders on their weapons. Only humans teach their children about the time they almost destroyed themselves. Only humans make their soldiers carry symbols of their worst mistakes. His voice grew stronger. Because we know what happens when you forget. When you think you are too civilized for such violence. When you believe your species is beyond that kind of evil. You are not beyond it, Vral said quietly. No one is, Tay agreed. That is the point. Dalvaxians are warriors. You pride yourselves on combat? Kelthari are pacifists. You abhor violence. Zellians are builders. Veltharians are cautious. Every species has their nature. Their identity. He touched the worn emblem again. Humans are dangerous. We know this. We accept this. And every day, with every choice, we decide not to be monsters. That emblem is not a threat. It is a promise. A reminder. We have the capacity for terrible things. We choose not to do them. Renth spoke up from the back. Your strength comes from knowing your weakness. Our strength comes from remembering our mistakes, Tay said. From knowing that any species, any civilization can fall into darkness if they forget the cost. Vral was quiet for a long moment. His crystalline body reflected the light in complex patterns. He was thinking, processing. Finally, he spoke. I have lived for 4,000 years. I have seen 200 species reach space travel. Most destroyed themselves before they reached the stars. Those that survived did so through luck or because they were naturally peaceful. He paused. Humanity survived through choice. Through conscious decision to be better. That is rare. Perhaps unique. We are not special, Tay said. We are just aware of what we could become if we stop trying. That awareness makes you special, Vral replied. He looked at the gathered crowd. I came here because my security team reported unusual activity. I expected a problem? Instead, I find a history lesson. His gaze returned to Tay. Continue. These stories should be told. He left without another word. But his approval meant something. The crowd seemed to relax. Conversation started again. Questions were asked about other emblems on the blade, but Kiva noticed something. There was still one emblem left unexplained. The one Renth had asked about earlier. The one Tay had refused to discuss. A simple circle with 7 dots, small, easy to miss. But Kiva had a feeling that emblem might be the most important one of all dots. She did not ask about it. Not yet. Some stories needed time. Some symbols required trust. She would wait. Eventually, she believed Captain Tay would explain that final emblem. And when he did, she suspected it would change everything again. The cargo bay was no longer empty. Over the next hour, more aliens arrived. Station workers, traders, travelers passing through. Someone had spread the word through the station network. There was a human captain telling stories about his knife. Stories about humanity. Real stories. Not the sanitized versions found in official records. Station security monitored the gathering but did not interfere. The crowd was peaceful, curious. They kept a respectful distance. Forming a loose circle around Tay, he sat calmly on his crate, still sharpening his knife. Occasionally, pausing to explain an emblem when someone asked, a Kelthari named Vess pushed through the crowd. The Kelthari were tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed to glow slightly in low light. They were telepaths, though weak ones. They could sense emotions but not read thoughts. As a species, they were absolute pacifists. Violence of any kind disturbed them deeply. Vess approached carefully, her movements hesitant. She pointed at an emblem showing a tree growing from ruins. "Captain, what is this one?" Tay looked at the symbol. His expression softened. "The Ashwood Renewal. I do not know this name," Vess said. "You would not." It was not a battle. Not in the traditional sense. Tay held up the knife so everyone could see the emblem clearly. Ashwood was an agricultural colony. Rich soil, perfect climate. 1 million people living there, growing food for a dozen nearby systems. Was? Vess caught the past tense. A plague virus hit the planet. Unknown origin. It spread through the population in weeks. Highly contagious. Extremely lethal. Within a month, 90% of Ashwood's population was dead. The crowd went silent. Plague stories frightened every species. Disease did not care about weapons or shields or military strength. It just killed. The Galactic Medical Consortium sent research teams, Tay continued. They took samples, studied the virus, then they declared Ashwood a loss. Total quarantine. No one in, no one out. Let the virus burn itself out. That is standard protocol, Vess said quietly. Containing a plague saves more lives than risking exposure. Probably, Tay agreed. But it also means everyone still alive on Ashwood was left to die. No rescue. No help. Just abandonment. How many survived the initial outbreak? Kiva asked. She had stayed close, wanting to hear more. About 100,000. Scattered across the planet. Isolated communities? People who had natural resistance or got lucky. Tay's finger traced the tree emblem. Dr. Mina did not think abandoning them was acceptable. One doctor? Vess seemed surprised. 1 doctor and 17 volunteers. Medical staff? Research scientists. An epidemiologist named Yong. They took a small transport ship. They broke the quarantine. Landed on Ashwood. That is insane, someone in the crowd said. A Talvirian merchant? They would have been infected immediately. They were, Tay confirmed. Within 48 hours, everyone on that team showed symptoms. The virus hit them hard, fever, organ failure. All the same symptoms that killed 900,000 people. They died, Vess said sadly. They lived. Tay looked at her. All 18 of them. Sick as hell for 3 weeks, but they lived. Human immune systems are different, adaptive, aggressive. The virus was lethal to most species, but humans could fight it. Their bodies learned, adapted, survived. Vess's eyes widened. They used themselves as test subjects. Not test subjects. Cure factories? Tay smiled grimly. Once they recovered, they had antibodies. Young synthesized a treatment from their blood. It was not perfect. It did not save everyone. But it saved enough. How many? Renth asked from his position at the back of the crowd. 80,000. Out of the 100,000 who survived the initial outbreak. Dr. Mina and her team spent 6 months on Ashwood, treating people, teaching local medical staff how to produce the treatment. By the time the consortium cleared the planet for contact again, Ashwood had survivors. A future. 18 people saved 80,000 lives, Kiva said, amazement clear in her voice. 18 people refused to let 80,000 people die alone. Tay corrected. There is a difference. Vess was quiet for a moment. Her people valued life above all else, but they also valued safety. The idea of deliberately exposing yourself to a lethal plague went against everything her species believed. Yet she could not deny the results. Could not argue with 80,000 lives saved. Humans are very brave, she said finally. Or very foolish. Often both, Tay admitted with a slight smile. Another voice spoke up. This one was different, softer. A Zelian female named Hira stepped forward. The Zelians were refugees. Their entire species had lost their homeworld 20 years ago. Only a few million survived, scattered across the galaxy. They lived on other species' worlds, worked other species' jobs, existed on borrowed time and borrowed space. Hira pointed at an emblem shaped like a hand holding a small flame. Her own hand was shaking. That one? She said. Please tell me about that one. Tay's expression changed, became gentler. He had seen Zelian refugees before. He knew their story, their loss. The sanctuary fleet, he said quietly. Hira's eyes filled with tears. I was there. The crowd shifted. This was not ancient history. This was recent, real, personal. Tell them, Hira whispered. Please. Tay nodded slowly. He looked at the gathered aliens, all watching him, waiting. 20 years ago, the Zelian sun went nova, unexpected, no warning. The star simply began to die. It gave them maybe 48 hours before radiation levels became lethal. The Zelian government had evacuation ships, Hira said, her voice breaking. But not enough. Not nearly enough. 400 million people on our homeworld. Transport for maybe 50 million. The Zelian government ships left first, Tay continued. Took the officials, the wealthy, the important people. By the time they finished their first runs, 30 hours had passed. Radiation was already killing people. They did not come back, Hira said bitterly. Our own government abandoned us. Human ships came instead. Tay's voice was steady, firm. Captain Soong commanded a cargo hauler called the Mercy Run. He heard the distress calls. He was 3 systems away. He came anyway. He was not alone, Hira added. 37 ships, all human. Cargo haulers, passenger transports, even some private vessels. They came into a radiation zone that was killing people. Came to rescue aliens they did not know. People who had nothing to offer in return. Tay pointed at the emblem, the hand holding the flame. They evacuated 400,000 Zelians. Packed them into ships designed for cargo, into maintenance areas, into anywhere there was space. Some ships took on 3 times their safe capacity. My family was on the Mercy Run, Hira said. In the cargo hold. 200 of us crammed into a space meant for shipping containers. We did not care. We were alive. 21 ships made it out, Tay said quietly. 16 were lost. The radiation damaged their engines, their shields. They could not jump to faster-than-light travel. They burned up in the nova wave. The crowd was completely silent now. Even Renth, the warrior, looked somber. 16 ships, Kiva whispered. How many humans died? 3,412, Tay said. The number came instantly. He had memorized it. Captain Soong went down with his ship. The Mercy Run's engines failed. He stayed at the controls, keeping the ship stable while everyone evacuated to rescue pods. He died saving my family, Hira finished. Word traveled fast on a space station, especially when something interesting was happening. Within an hour, other crew members began appearing in the cargo bay. They came with excuses, looking for equipment, checking inventory, taking a shortcut to another section. But Kiva knew the truth. They had heard about Captain Tay and his knife. They wanted to see for themselves. A Dalvaxian named Renth was the first to arrive. He was massive, even by his species' standards. Dalvaxians were reptilian, with thick scales and powerful muscles. They were warriors by culture. Fighting was their art form, their religion, their way of life. Renth worked as a security officer on the station, and he carried himself like every moment was preparation for battle. He walked straight to Tay without hesitation. Dalvaxians did not know subtlety. They did not know fear either. "Captain," Renth said, his voice deep and rumbling. "I heard you were sharing war stories. My species respects warriors. I wish to hear." Tay looked up at the towering alien. Most humans would have been intimidated. Renth stood nearly 3 meters tall and weighed more than 3 men. His claws could tear through metal. His jaw could crush bone. But Tay just nodded calmly, looking for anything specific. Tay asked. Renth pointed at the knife with one thick claw. "That emblem?" "The broken chain wrapped around a star. It looks familiar, but I cannot place it." Kiva moved closer. She had not noticed that symbol before. Now that Renth mentioned it, she could see it clearly. A chain with a broken link, coiled around a 5-pointed star. The design was elegant, precise. Someone had spent time on it. Tay traced the emblem with his thumb. "The Iridani liberation?" Renth's eyes narrowed. "Now I remember. The humans who attacked the Chris Fortress world. Bold, stupid, but bold." "Not stupid," Tay said mildly. "Necessary. Tell me." Renth sat down on a nearby crate. The metal groaned under his weight. "I only know the official reports. They do not tell the whole story." Tay set down his sharpening stone. He seemed to know this would take time. 40 years ago, a human colony ship called the Iridani was captured by Chris slavers. 3,000 people. Men, women, children, everyone. The Chris took them to their fortress world. Put them in chains. Prepared to sell them across the sector. Kiva felt her skin crawl. Slavery was illegal in most of the galaxy now. But the Chris had operated outside galactic law. They were powerful enough that no one wanted to fight them. The Galactic Council had debated sanctions for years without action. "The Galactic Council talked," Renth said with disgust. "They always talk. Never act." "For 6 months they debated," Tay confirmed. "Formed committees. Wrote proposals. Discussed diplomatic solutions. While 3,000 humans lived in cages. And humanity got impatient," Renth said, showing his teeth in what might have been a smile. "Captain Day got impatient," Tay corrected. "He commanded a stealth frigate called the Silent Retribution. Small ship. Small crew. 40 people total. Not a military vessel, officially. Just a scout ship." Officially," Renth repeated, understanding the implication. Day took his ship into Chris territory, alone, no backup. No support fleet. Just his crew and a plan. Tay's voice held admiration. His combat medic was named Hannah, his chief engineer was Quan. Both volunteered for the mission, knowing they probably would not come back. "How does one ship attack a fortress world?" Kiva asked. It seemed impossible. Fortress worlds had defense systems, shields, weapons platforms. Thousands of soldiers. "You don't attack it," Tay said. "You sneak in." Renth laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "I like this day already." The Silent Retribution was designed for stealth operations. It could hide from sensors, land without detection. But once they were on the ground, they had no advantages. Just 40 humans against an entire fortress. Tay picked up his knife again, holding it so the light caught the broken chain emblem. They went in at night. Split into 4 teams. Quan's team took out the power grid. Hannah's team secured the medical facilities. They led the main team straight to the holding cells. They moved fast, silent. By the time the Chris knew they were there, half the prisoners were already free. And then? Kiva prompted. Then it got loud. Tay smiled slightly. "Free slaves are angry slaves?" 3,000 angry humans plus 40 armed soldiers against a surprised garrison. The Chris were good fighters, but they were not ready for that. No one is ready for that. The humans armed the slaves, Renth said with approval. "Smart. Arm them, organize them, and turn them loose," Tay agreed. But here is the interesting part. When Day's team reached the holding cells, they found something unexpected. "What?" Kiva asked. 15,000 other slaves. 17 different species. The Chris had been collecting them for years, all in the same facility. Kiva's eyes widened. 15,000? Day's mission parameters said rescue the humans. Get out fast. Do not engage beyond necessity. Tay paused. Day changed the mission parameters. He freed them all, Renth said. It was not a question. Every single one. 17 species. 15,000 individuals. Gave them weapons. Gave them a chance. Hannah treated the injured. Quan hot-wired Chris transport ships. In one night, they evacuated everyone. The fortress? Renth asked. Burned. Day set demolition charges throughout the structure. When the last transport lifted off, the fortress collapsed. The Chris Empire lost their main slaving operation and 17,000 potential slaves in one night. Kiva tried to imagine it. 40 humans attacking an entire fortress world. Freeing thousands of prisoners. Destroying a military installation. Escaping with everyone alive. It sounded like fiction. Like stories told to children. The Galactic Council was furious, Tay continued. Called it an unauthorized military action. Violation of sovereign territory. Some species demanded humanity be sanctioned. What did humanity say? Kiva asked. Tay's smile grew sharper. We shut down 4 more Chris slaving operations that month. Bigger ones. Freed 20,000 more slaves. Told the council they could either help or get out of the way. Renth laughed again, louder this time. And the Chris Empire? Collapsed within a year. Turns out when you build an empire on slavery and someone keeps freeing your slaves, the economy fails. Other species saw humans doing what the council would not. They joined in. Started their own raids. Within 5 years, the Chris were gone, scattered, broken. Good, Renth said simply. His species understood strength. They respected action over words. This story appealed to him, but Kiva noticed something else. Tay's expression had grown distant. Sad, maybe, or tired. Captain Day received a formal reprimand from his government, Tay said quietly, for violating orders, for risking his crew, for causing a diplomatic incident. He paused. They gave him the reprimand at the same ceremony where they gave him humanity's highest military honor. The council was angry. 17 species sent him medals anyway. Renth pointed at another emblem on the blade. A simple circle with 7 dots inside. What is that one? Tay's expression hardened. His hand covered the emblem protectively. That one is called Saul's Children. It is personal. Something in his tone made both Renth and Kiva step back. Some stories were not meant for sharing. Some symbols were too heavy to explain. The circle with 7 dots remained a mystery, at least for now, but they had learned something important. The emblems on this blade were not just decorations. They were history. Real events. Real people who made impossible choices. And somehow Captain Tay knew them all. Kiva could not believe what she was hearing. 200 against 10,000. Those were not battle numbers. That was a massacre waiting to happen. The proper military response to such odds was immediate evacuation. Save who you can and retreat. Everyone knew this. It was basic tactical sense. They evacuated, she said, hoping she was right. The civilians were removed before the Krethic arrived. Tay shook his head slowly. The relief fleet was 3 days away. The Krethic gave us 3 hours. Then the soldiers evacuated with the civilians. There must have been enough transport ships. There were. Tay's fingers still traced the mountain symbol. Enough ships for maybe 30,000 people. First wave could take 20,000. Second wave, if there was time, could take another 10,000. That left 20,000 with no way off the planet. Kiva felt sick. Her species did not handle violence well, even violence that happened long ago. The idea of 20,000? People trapped with those creatures approaching made her want to leave the cargo bay. But she stayed. Something told her this story was important. The ranking officers were Lieutenant Hyun and Sergeant Yuna, Tay continued. His voice was steady, like he was reading from a report, but his eyes showed something different, memory, pain, pride. They made the call, no evacuation. Everyone stays, everyone fights. That is insane, Kiva said. The words came out before she could stop them. Forgive me, Captain, but that is suicide. Staying to fight was choosing death. Yes, Tay agreed. It was, but leaving meant abandoning 20,000 people. Leaving meant watching from space as the Krethik slaughtered civilians. Leaving meant living with that choice forever. He paused. Hyan and Yuna decided dying with them was better. Kiva's mind struggled with this concept. Her people valued life above everything else. Sacrifice was acceptable only when it achieved something. Dying for nothing made no sense. But these humans had stayed knowing they would lose. What happened? She asked. Tay set the knife down on his lap. He picked up his sharpening stone again but did not use it. He just held it, feeling its weight. Ganghwa Ridge was the highest point near the main settlement. Good defensive position. Hyan took every soldier up there. They also took anyone who wanted to fight. Civilian volunteers, about 300 people total, joined them on that ridge. The rest stayed in the reinforced shelters below. 300 against 10,000, Kiva repeated. Against 10,000 Krethik warriors, Tay corrected. There is a difference. Krethik do not tire, they do not fear. They do not stop, they are weapons with teeth and claws. He started sharpening again. The sound filled the quiet space between his words. The Krethik attacked in waves. First wave hit 2 hours after landing. 2,000 of them. They came straight up the ridge, no strategy, just raw aggression. That is how they fight. Overwhelmed through numbers. How did 300 stop 2,000? Terrain, Tay said simply. The ridge was narrow. Only so many could attack at once. Hyan positioned everyone perfectly. The Krethik had to come uphill, through choke points, into prepared positions. Humans had explosives, barriers, every advantage they could create. Kiva imagined the scene. Her people's history archives had videos of Krethik attacks. She had watched some during her military studies. The creatures moved like liquid, nightmares, fast, relentless, terrifying. The idea of standing in front of them with just basic weapons seemed impossible. The first wave broke, Tay said. Killed 800 Krethik. Lost 30 humans. The second wave came 6 hours later. 3,000 this time, more prepared, more aggressive. They learned from the first attack. The humans adapted too? Kiva guessed. Yuna led a team down into the Krethik positions at night. Close combat, blades and explosives. Killed 300 Krethik while they regrouped. Made them angry, made them stupid. Tay's hands moved faster now, stones sliding quickly along the blade's edge. The motion seemed to help him tell the story. Third wave came at dawn, 5,000. Everything the Krethik had left. They did not hold back. They threw everything at that ridge. The battle lasted 11 hours. How? Kiva's translator box could barely keep up with her rapid clicking. How did they survive? Barely. Tay stopped sharpening. He looked at the knife blade, at the mountain symbol that represented all of this. When the relief fleet arrived 72 hours after the first attack, they found 127 humans alive on Ganghwa Ridge. 43 of them were civilians. People who had never fought before but picked up weapons when it mattered. And the Krethik? 6,000 dead. The remaining 4,000 retreated when they saw the fleet arriving. The Krethik are vicious but not stupid. They knew they had lost. Kiva was silent for a long time. Her mind processed the numbers, the implications. 200 soldiers and some civilians had held off 10,000 bioweapons for 3 days, had killed more than half of them, had saved 20,000 lives. It should not have been possible. You were there? She said suddenly. It was not a question. Tay nodded once. I was 19 years old, fresh out of basic training. I had been on Ganghwa for 6 weeks when the Krethik came. I held position on the southern slope with 8 others. By the end, I was one of 3 from that position still alive. The emblem, Kiva said, looking at the mountain symbol with new understanding. It represents the ridge. It represents what humans do when there is no good choice, Tay corrected. We had 2 options, run and save some people. Or stay and maybe save everyone. We stayed, but you could have all died. The civilians too. Yes, Tay met her eyes, but we didn't. And 20,000 people lived because we made that choice. Because Hyan and Yuna refused to leave anyone behind. Because 300 people said if we die together. Kiva looked at the other symbols on the blade. She counted them quickly. 42 different emblems. If each one represented a story like this, then this knife was not just a weapon. It was a history book, a memorial, a reminder. How many of these symbols represent battles? She asked. Tay smiled, but it was not a happy expression. All of them, in one way or another. But not all battles are fought with weapons, Kiva, you will see. He went back to sharpening, the conversation apparently over. But Kiva did not move. She stood there, staring at the knife, wondering what other stories were carved into that ancient blade. Wondering what kind of species carved their history into weapons. Wondering if her teachers had been wrong about humans being simple warriors. Maybe humans were something else entirely. Something more complicated. Something more dangerous. The cargo bay of the Meridian Dawn was quiet. Captain Tay sat on an old supply crate, his legs crossed, his hands moving in a steady rhythm. The sound of stones sliding across metal echoed softly through the empty space. He was sharpening his knife, just like he did every week. It was an old habit, one he never broke, no matter where his ship traveled. The station outside was busy. Epsilon 7 was one of the biggest trading hubs in this sector of the galaxy. Ships came and went constantly, bringing goods and people from 100 different worlds. The Meridian Dawn was docked here for routine maintenance. Nothing special. Just replacing some worn parts and refueling before the next run. Tay didn't mind the quiet. After 3 weeks of constant travel, the silence felt good. His crew was scattered across the station, enjoying their shore leave. Some were drinking at the bars. Others were shopping or sleeping in better beds than the ship offered. Tay preferred to stay here, alone with his thoughts and his blade. The knife was old. Very old. The handle was wrapped in dark leather that had been replaced many times over the years. The blade itself was still sharp, still strong, despite its age. Tay had carried this knife for more than 20 years. It had seen him through more battles than he cared to remember. He moved the sharpening stone along the edge with practiced care. Slow, steady strokes. The blade caught the light from the overhead panels, gleaming silver. As the light shifted, something else became visible on the metal surface. Marks, symbols, dozens of them, etched carefully into the steel along both sides of the blade. Tay barely glanced at them anymore. He knew every symbol by heart. Each one told a story. Each one represented something important. But to anyone else, they were just decorative marks. Pretty pictures on an old weapon? Most aliens who saw the knife assumed humans just liked to make their tools fancy. The sound of footsteps made Tay look up. Someone was entering the cargo bay from the main corridor. He recognized the clicking sound of clawed feet on metal floors. A Valtharian. Their species always moved carefully, placing each foot with precision. Kiva appeared from behind a stack of containers. She was young for a Valtharian, maybe 10 standard years old by their aging. Her compound eyes reflected the light like jewels, shifting colors as she moved. Her 4 arms carried a datapad and some kind of scanning device. She worked as a navigator on the Meridian Dawn, one of 3 non-human crew members. "Captain," she said, her translator box converting her clicking speech into standard language. "I did not know you were here. I'm looking for replacement parts for the navigation console." "Storage lockers are in the back," Tay said, not stopping his work. "Section C, thank you." Kiva started to walk past him, then stopped. Her head tilted, multiple eyes focusing on his hands. "What are you doing?" "Sharpening my knife." "Why?" Tay smiled slightly. "Because a dull blade is dangerous. More likely to slip, more likely to cause an accident." "But why do you carry a blade at all?" "We have energy weapons, cutting tools, advanced equipment." Kiva's confusion was obvious. Most species had moved past simple metal weapons thousands of years ago. To them, a knife was like carrying a stone axe, primitive, outdated. "Tradition," Tay said simply. Human soldiers have always carried blades. Even now, Kiva moved closer, curiosity overcoming her natural caution. Valtharians were not warriors by nature. Their species preferred observation and careful planning. Violence made them nervous. But Kiva had been traveling with humans for 2 years now. She had learned they were not as dangerous as her people believed. At least, not to friends. She watched Tay's hands move for a moment. The motion was almost hypnotic. Stone against steel. A soft scraping sound, patient, steady, then the light shifted again. As she saw the markings on the blade more clearly, her body went rigid. All 4 arms froze. Her eyes focused intently on one particular symbol near the handle of the knife. It was shaped like a mountain with lines crossing through it. Simple, clean, but something about it seemed familiar. "Captain," she said slowly, "those marks on your blade, what are they?" "Just decorations," Tay said, but his tone suggested there was more to it. "That symbol there." Kiva pointed with one delicate claw at the mountain emblem. "I have seen it before?" "In military history files. From the War Academy archives." Tay's hands stopped moving. He looked at the symbol Kiva had indicated. For a moment, his expression was distant, as if he was remembering something from long ago. "You studied military history?" He asked. All Valtharians must study the major conflicts of the galaxy, to learn what to avoid, what mistakes not to repeat. She stepped closer. "That symbol represents a battle, a human battle. I cannot remember the name, but I know it was significant." Tay set down his sharpening stone. He held up the knife, letting the light play across the blade. The mountain symbol seemed to glow. "Gangwa Ridge," he said quietly. Kiva's translator struggled with the word for a moment before producing something close to the original pronunciation, but the name meant nothing to her. She waited for Tay to continue. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he ran his thumb along the emblem, tracing its shape. The metal was slightly raised where the design had been etched deep into the steel. Someone had taken great care with this carving. It was not just decoration. It was meant to last. 200 years ago, Tay began, his voice steady but soft, there was a colony world called Gangwa, new settlement. About 50,000 people, families, mostly, farmers, engineers, teachers, the usual mix for a new colony. Kiva listened, all her attention focused on the captain. The Krethic swarm found it. At those words, Kiva's entire body tensed. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Krethic. They were nightmare creatures, bioweapons, created by an empire that had fallen thousands of years ago, but the Krethic had survived. They bred in the dark spaces between stars. They attacked without warning. They took no prisoners. They showed no mercy. How many defenders? Kiva asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tay looked at her directly. His eyes were calm, steady, but there was something else there. Something old and hard. 200 soldiers, he said, against 10,000 Krethic. Kiva's translator box made a sound like a gasp.